And so my title is really right up front, with apologies to Shakespeare. Hoarding disorder, to keep or not to keep, is that a question? Next slide. And so here, I have no conflict of interest. So I'm just letting you know that, which is part of what we have to do to get us the CME credits through St. Charles Hospital. Next slide. And so my learning objectives are that you will know the definition of hoarding disorder. You will know prevalence, vulnerabilities, and key clinical features. And then you will gain knowledge about what interventions work for people. So I have some clinical interventions, say for mental health therapists, QMHP, and I also have interventions like for case managers. Next slide. So just take a moment to look at this picture. And I have literally been in homes like this. All my career, I've actually worked in the trenches in community mental health program as a geriatric mental health specialist. And so I was teaching about hoarding disorder way before it became kind of popular to, attend conferences on this. This was a home like many that I have visited. Next slide. And so I want to begin with a cautionary tale of two brothers. A tale of two brothers. They are the Collier brothers, Homer and Langley, who lived in New York City. They were rich. They lived in a brownstone, and they were considered a kind of like eccentric. They were found dead in their home in 1947, surrounded by 140 tons of items. So, there was a stench coming out of their apartment, and then someone called the police. Hey, come and check. The city workers had to actually dig their way through using a bulldozer till they discovered the body. And Langley's body took several days to discover. They thought Langley had disappeared. So what had happened was they were both elderly, but Langley took care of Homer, who was blind at this stage. And Langley also, they were both considered eccentric, and Langley also had kind of some paranoid, delusions. And what he had done, he had put booby traps all through the house. They were these were both college educated guys. One of them was a chemistry major. So they put he had put these booby traps around the house. Imagine, in that clutter, he had put booby traps. And one day he was taking food to his brother, Homer, who was blind. He stepped on one of them and he fell and was electrocuted, and Homer starved to death. So it's a very sad story. And they couldn't find Langley's body because it was deep in the house, and they had thought Langley had run away, and they'd put out an all points bulletin until they found his body. So yes, a hoarding disorder can have dire outcomes. And so this is really a cautionary tale that I like to begin with. Next slide. So what is hoarding disorder? It is the acquisition of, so it's acquiring of, and also the inability to discard items, even though they appear to have no value to you and me. For example, grocery bags, old newspapers, empty meat cartons, medication bottles, whatever it is, you acquire them and you can't discard them. So in addition, it is a syndrome characterized by excessive collecting and saving behavior that results in cluttered living space and significant distress or impairment. So this acquisition and this ability to not throw things away or give them away results in cluttered living space. That means the living space can no longer be used for its intended purpose. It no longer can be used as a kitchen. It can no longer be used as a bathroom because it's full of newspapers. And it causes distress or impairment. So it's four things: acquiring, inability to discard, resulting in cluttered living space, and impairment. Next slide. And here is what I'm just putting, I'm giving it to you in kind of a shortcut. acquisition, saving behaviors, disorganization, and clutter. That's essentially what hoarding disorder is. Next slide. So I just went over the 4 elements, and this is what you need to remember when working with your clients. Are they meeting these elements? So it's not just acquiring, it's also difficulty discarding, and that it should result in that living space, a clutter. Okay, so excessive acquiring, difficulty discarding, cluttered living space, distress or impairment due to the clutter and the hoarding. Next slide. And so everyone asks me, Nirmala, what's the difference between collecting and hoarding? I'm a collector of all kinds of things. I don't consider myself a hoarder. So when you're a collector, your things are neatly organized, they're in mint condition, they're kept in specific areas. It could be on a shelf, it could be in a container box, for storage. You keep and your quality of life is not compromised. It's not taking over your living space, and you have actually a lot of pride in it. I do in some of the things I collect. So whenever I have guests or friends come over, I always show them, hey, I love collecting this, come and see my collection. So there's lots of pride. Hoarding is generally, you're very disorganized. It takes over your entire home. It causes a lot of distress to you because, people don't come to visit you, family members have cut off from you, you are afraid of what can happen. There's a risk to your health, and there's some safety concerns. So can you see, collecting is different from hoarding. Next slide. So this is the criteria right out of DSM-5. As you know, we are in the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which came out in 2013. And here is what the criteria is. Persistent difficulty discarding or parting with possession regardless of actual value. Difficulty is due to perceived need to save the item due to the distress associated with discarding. It is so distressful to discard that the person doesn't discard. And this leads to a third criteria, accumulation of possessions that congest and clutter active living areas. Hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment, which is interference in your social functioning, in your occupational functioning, and in other areas of your life. So this is right out of DSM-5. As you know, in prior editions of DSM, hoarding disorder was not there. It wasn't a discrete disorder. It was only created as a disorder in the 5th edition. Next slide. And then continued, once we diagnose the person, we also need to say hoarding is not attributed to another medical condition, such as, say, a dementia or a brain injury, where damage to the brain is causing you to kind of collect and hoard. And it is not explained by another mental illness. And then you can add qualifiers or specifiers. So you can give the diagnosis and you can add excessive acquisition, or you can add poor insight. So that is the DSM-5 criteria for hoarding disorder. So now it is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Next slide. So what's the prevalence? 5% of people in community surveys have a hoarding disorder. That is about 16 million Americans. Do you know that schizophrenia and bipolar disorder combined is 3%? Combined. Here we are saying the prevalence is 5%. Even among all of us on this call today, if we are the community, 5% of us would have a hoarding disorder. And then look at what was really startling to me when I first read this, when DSM-5 came out. Hoarding, it'll come a little later too. Hoarding disorder increases with age, so that by the time you get to the older age groups like 60 plus, 6.2% of that older group have a hoarding disorder. Okay, and then this is just a factor that hoarding was 4 times as great in the poorest compared to the wealthiest household. And there could be several reasons for it. Because of time, we are not going to have a discussion on that. Next slide. And here are some more startling facts. I was startled. Look at the average age of onset. 11 years old, that's when the onset begins. 11 to 15 years old, pre-teens to early teens. And then what happens? You begin that early, it is a chronic and worsening state. That means with each decade of your life, it gets chronic and worse. So we should not wait. We should intervene as soon as possible. Because guess what? Severity of hoarding increases with each decade of life. So you have the disorder when you're in your 20s, by your 50s, it's entrenched in your life. It is kind of pervasive and it's taken over your life. 3 symptoms are more prevalent among older adults compared with younger adults, and perhaps because one reason is they come to our attention more often. Look at that average age for treatment. That is the first time someone accesses treatment for hoarding disorder is age 50. By that time, what? You've had 30 years of this disorder. And women seek treatment more than men, which is across the health span. So it's not just for hoarding disorders, it's across all health interventions, even physical health. Women seek help, men don't have that kind of built-in help-seeking behavior. So, but what was really startling was the onset and that how it worsens with each decade of life after that. Next slide. So what are some risk factors which should raise people's kind of awareness? Indecisiveness is a prominent feature of individuals who hoard and of their first degree relatives. I mean, they have a very hard time making decisions. Should I, should I not, should I not? And by default, then they don't make the decision because it's so difficult. Individuals who hoard report retrospectively having experienced some kind of trauma that led to the onset, or at least caused an exacerbation. And that they've looked at studies, and that's often hoarding behavior has a familial component. So those are some risk factors, but for our presentation today, I want you to hold on to that indecisiveness as a risk factor. Next slide. Look at this. If there's any take-home message today, aside from the definition and prevalence, it is psychiatric comorbidities. What are co-occurring psychiatric problems with hoarding disorder? And look at that, depression. 50% of people who have have hoarding disorder also have a clinical depression, along with all of those other disorders. But I really want you to focus on depression and anxiety. Let that sink in for a minute. Half of people with hoarding disorder will have a depression. Next slide. So what is the key take-home message? 75% of individuals who hoard either have a depression or an anxiety. 75%. So imagine all of us on this training right now. We are about 95, say we are 100. And imagine if we were all hoarders. 75 of us would have a depression or an anxiety. These individuals who are experiencing hoarding disorder and have depression and anxiety are what we call behaviorally deactivated. That means they don't have the oomph and the drive to get up and get things going and follow your instructions to declutter. So they're deactivated, which decreases their motivation to clean up clutter, to clean up and follow clutter protocols. And so what is my message to you? Screen, screen, screen for depression and anxiety. I think 80% of you said, hey, we work with people with hoarding disorder. 80% of you said we have no policy and procedure. 80% have said you've never attended a training. So this is my first thing to you. When you go back today and work with your clients, screen for depression and anxiety if you already know they have a hoarding disorder, and then some very good screening tools, which I will send to Kelly, which you can use PHQ-9, GDS, Geriatric Depression Scale. There's also something called the PHQ-4 that we combine depression and anxiety. So screen, 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 because if you want them to make a difference in their hoarding disorder or to declutter their home and not lose their apartment or not be evicted, you have to treat the depression and anxiety. Next slide. So what are the consequences of this hoarding? Health problems, unsanitary living conditions. I can tell you where I've gone into home. There's animal feces, urine, there's a strong stench of ammonia coming up from the carpet. Safety, there could be fire, falls, infestation of bugs and rodents, structural weight. There's so much weight that the floor collapses, blocked egress. There was a very tragic few years ago in Oregon City, where I used to work before, where someone died, their house burnt down because neither could they get to the door and nor could the firemen get into the house because it was blocked. And falls. 1 in 3 Oregonians falls with dire health outcomes. You have interpersonal difficulties with families, friends, neighbors. You get socially isolated because you may have poor personal hygiene, because your bathroom is cluttered. You can have legal problems. The big ones are a threat of eviction. Child welfare may come and take your child away. If you have an elderly person, APS could be there, looking at elder abuse or neglect. You have diminished self-esteem, some shame and guilt. Oh my gosh, look at my home. Look at how I'm living. And then obviously it can also result in impairment at work. Next slide. So it's also a public health hazard. There's a fire hazard. There's a fire hazard. I just told you about the story, blocked fire escapes, insects and rodents, not only in the cluttered home, but it can kind of bleed out to your neighborhood. Safety concerns. It causes unhealthy conditions for your entire neighborhood. It signals neglect of people and animals. So it could be an elderly person who's living there. It could be a child in there. It could be animals. Building code violations, lease violations, sanitation, odor nuisance, garbage, trash, animal waste. So all of these actually also cause a public health hazard. Next slide. So why do people hoard? We talked about vulnerabilities. There's a strong familial component. There could be some early trauma experiences, and we're going to go over some of that. They have information processing deficits. That means it's a brain dysfunction. They add these kind of meaning and values to possessions, which seem of little value to most of us. They have strong positive emotional reactions when they're collecting and negative emotional reactions when they have to discard it. And when they acquire and when they don't have to discard, it actually reinforces that. Next slide. So here are some characteristics. They have difficulty organizing possessions. They have strong positive feelings when they acquire items. I mean, they feel delight and joy. Who doesn't want to feel that, right? So it's Reinforcing, correct? Hey, I'm going to collect more of those bags, those grocery bags, because it gives me joy and delight. It kind of, makes me feel better. Strong negative feelings like guilt, fear, anger, anxiety, when you have to even consider discarding those. Oh my gosh, I have newspapers from the floor to the ceiling. I really need to discard it. And before you know it, you're in the throes of an anxiety attack. And what do? No, I'm not going to discard it because the distress is so high. Strong belief that these items are valuable or useful. You feel responsible for some of these items and you deny the problem, even when the clutter is interfering with your life. That you can't use the bathroom. And I've been to homes where someone was peeing in a milk jar, like a milk gallon jug, because they couldn't use the toilet. Or they were sleeping in their car because the entire house was cluttered, including the bedroom. So they were going out and sleeping in the car. That's how they came to the notice of the police, because one of the persons was a young child with intellectual disabilities. So denial of the problem. Next slide. So common traits, remember I said hang on to indecisiveness. So the first common trait, I'll jump to the indecisiveness. This inability to make a decision. Should I keep? Should I not keep? Should I keep? Should I not keep? What if I file this away and I will never be able to find it? What if I put this in a box and then I won't remember? Can you see the indecisiveness? The other one is perfectionism. And you may say, really, Nirmala? Perfectionism? Yes. I can't get rid of this until I've read and remember everything in this newspaper. The perfectionism is essentially fear of making a mistake. So that being perfect becomes the standard, because that way you won't make a mistake. So you don't have to deal with the distress. And then there's procrastination, which kind of goes hand in hand with the above two. I won't get rid of this today because it may have some useful information that I may need tomorrow or I may need eventually. And before you know it, you've had 10 years of procrastination. Next slide. So remember, we talked about indecisiveness. It is a hallmark of hoarding. And basically, it is a way of avoiding making mistakes, correct? I won't make a decision. I'll just let it be there sitting on the floor, because that way I'll never know whether I made a mistake or this was the right thing. So can you see? It's the hallmark. So also perfectionistic concerns, which is fear of making a mistake. And that hoarding is what we call an avoidance behavior. All of you who are therapists in mental health, you all know about, and we're going to talk a lot about avoidance. And what does that mean in hoarding disorder? Saving a possession allows the hoarder to avoid making a decision to throw it away, thereby avoiding the worry that a mistake has been made. So can you see? I will just avoid throwing it away. Therefore, I won't have that distress. Did I make the right mistake? Should I have kept it? Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to sleep today because I'm going to worry whether I made the right choice. So what do? You know what? I'll just avoid making the decision. And this is indicative of impaired executive functioning, which is a frontal lobe function from our brain. And those of you who have attended my trainings in the past, you've heard me talk about executive functioning. That's where that's where we make decisions. That is impaired. Next slide. So acquiring can be anything. It could be compulsive buying. Whether you go on the web, you go to retail, you go to home shop, you go to yards, garage sales, you just compulsively buy. Compulsively acquiring of free things, whether it's flyers, handouts, giveaway, trash dives, dumpster diving, anything. You just compulsively pick things up. Or passive acquiring, like junk mail, food packaging. It comes into your home, but you don't throw it out. Grocery bags. So this is what acquiring looks like. Next slide. Clutter and disorganization. Random piles of things. Fear of putting things out of sight. Indecisiveness. Oh my gosh, I cannot make this decision. What if it's a mistake? And this indecisiveness is pervasive. It affects all areas of the life, and it's a cardinal kind of marker of hoarding disorder. And churning. How many of you have heard your clients say, what if, just in case? What if this happens and I need this book again? What if I need this broken iron, which is rusting in my garage? What if there is a spare part in it that I may need 10 years from now? So I'm not going to throw it. Okay. Just in case I need to repair something, I'm going to keep this pile of broken tires and rusting nails and broken appliances here, because you have a fear of making the wrong decision. Can you see what a grip this has on people who have this issue? Next slide. So for all of us who are on this call, some of us are case managers, APS, all of that, but some of us who work directly with clients, and they could also be case managers and others who may not be doing like therapy kind of work, but still work with clients. The goals for treatment are creating uncluttered space. That means you're increasing appropriate use of space. You're not going to make their home look like Martha Stewart's in a magazine, but it should be uncluttered, so it's safe and they're not going to fall and break their hip. And it is available for appropriate use, like a shower is available for a shower, a toilet is available for toilet, and a kitchen is available for heating a meal. You're going to improve their decision-making skills. Remember, indecisiveness. You will improve their organizational skills. And you will teach them to discard unneeded possessions, and at the same time, teach them skills to reduce acquiring new things. So it's very simple, the treatment plan. All of you who write treatment plans, this is the treatment plan for hoarding disorder. Create uncluttered space, increase appropriate use of space, improve decision-making, improve organization, and teach skills to discard and reduce acquisition. Next slide. So what do I mean by organization? So people with this disorder have very hard time, organizing, because they have very narrow definitions of categories. Thus, almost everything has to be saved. No, I have categories. This is history. This is music history. So I can divide things up. The rest, I don't care. I can throw it out. People with hoarding disorder have a very hard time categorizing. And so what happens is they save every and anything. Organizational problem is mixing of important and unimportant things. Having difficulty determining, what is important and what is less important. For example, hey, your paycheck stubs are important, but gum wrappers are not. And this may sound, Nirmala, you're being facetious. No, they have a hard time figuring out or determining what is more important and what is less important. So those are the skills you're going to teach. So what happens when you have this is everything is compelling. And therefore, it's very hard to distinguish what should I keep and what should I not keep. And that was the title of my talk. To keep or not to keep, is that really a question? Because I don't know what should I keep and what should I not keep. Next slide. Remember, we talked about behavioral avoidance? Saving possessions allows the hoarding the person who hoards, to avoid loss of objects that he may need someday. In his belief system is, I may need this object someday. Even to you, it looks like a rusty old tire, rusty packet of nails, broken down instruments. The person who hoards will say, nope, I need to keep it because I may need it someday. Hoarding also prevents emotional upset, correct? Because it's very distressing to give it away when you don't know whether you should or you should not, correct? Hoarders save to avoid decision making. Did you know that? They save to avoid decision making. And that saving becomes an accumulation, which leads to cluttered, which leads to total chaos. Because of their excessive concern or fear about making mistakes. What if I need it? What if tomorrow I need a grocery bag and I can't find it? So I'm going to keep 100 of them right here accumulating on my floor. I'm going to keep this old tire just in case in the future I need a hub. And before you know it, you have 30 old tires and hubs in your garage that you can't walk, you can't park your car in there. This is what behavioral avoidance looks like for people who hoard. Next slide. So it's very good for all of you who work in whatever capacity to establish with your clients personal rules for saving and for acquiring. If you must have something, ask the question, do I have an immediate use for it? Not whether I'll need it 20 years from now. Time to deal with it appropriately. I have a place for it. I have a neatly labeled box I can put on it. I know rodents will not come. Money to afford it and space to put it. Raise the conversation about need versus want. Assure them we all have rules for acquiring. And ask them, what are some of your rules? And share some of your own rules for acquiring. Next slide. Keep calm and just say no. It's easier said than done. Next slide. So this is the triangle of depression. You know, I told you, what did I say? 50% of people with hoarding disorder have a co-occurring depression, and most often it's a significant depression. You know, it's not like some light dysthymia kind of thing. It's a significant depression. And this is the classic triangle of depression: thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Next slide. In CBT, we emphasize that it is not necessarily the situation that causes the distress, but the experience, but rather it is the individual's interpretation of that situation that causes those negative thoughts, those distressing feelings, and leads to kind of unhelpful behaviors, which is, you know, kind of usually avoidance. Next slide. So here are some questions that you can teach, or even in your sessions with your clients, to challenge those beliefs about acquiring and not discarding. How many do I already have? Do I really need this one? Do I have an immediate need for this? Can I manage without it, even though it may be distressing? Do I want this taking up space in my home? Do I actually have time to read this newspaper article that I'm trying to save? So really giving them these list of questions and writing them down on a card, you know, or a piece of paper, or putting it in their smartphone and telling them, pull up these questions every time you look at something that you're going to save. So here you're challenging their beliefs. Next slide. So something we do in anxiety disorders and in depression and in anxiety, you know, in hoarding disorder too, is exposure therapy. And I want to talk about the role of avoidance in maintaining hoarding. Remember, I said people don't discard because it is so emotionally distressing to them. And so what they do is they just avoid it. And so when we talk about avoidance, we want to explain to our client the process of habituation, that exposure, and we're going to talk a lot about it, combats avoidance directly. We help them develop a hierarchy. That means we'll first work with them on things which are easy to do, and then we work our way up to more difficult things. We establish rules. We keep repeating this exposure. And then we always wrap up with lessons learned. Next slide. Remember, we talked about avoidance and escape behaviors in depression and in hoarding disorder. So depressed individuals and people who hoard tend to substitute behaviors that provide immediate relief, that delay discomfort, but are not helpful in the long term. So, hey, I will avoid throwing this set of newspapers away so that I don't have to contend with the fact that, have I made a mistake? What if, just in case? You know what? It's too distressing. I am just going bonkers. I will not do it. That's what avoidance is. For example, in depression, often avoiding contact with your community by staying in bed all day. I'm just going to lay in bed and sleep. Can function to avoid exposure to situations that elicit thoughts and feelings that are very distressful. So a depressed person says, I'm just going to stay in bed and just avoid the world. You know, you can't live your life that way, correct? Next slide. So it's very critical for all of us on this call today to really understand, like what is avoidance? Avoidance often begins as a very natural response to distress. So in a hoarding disorder, the person feels so much distress to throw things away. Remember, discard, that you don't want to feel bad. So you avoid doing that thing that makes you feel bad. In the short term, you get relief. Hey, I don't have to deal with my perfectionistic mandate with having to make a decision and then think about all the things I could have done with that bag. So in the short term, it gives you some relief because you feel relieved, you feel safer, and you feel less stress. For example, the phone rings, you feel anxious, you don't answer the phone because you think, hey, it's my boss calling. I won't answer the phone. And what is the immediate payback? You feel a bit calmer. I dodged that bullet, but is it solving your problem? No. Usually we avoid because it feels better in the short term, even though we may know that it's likely to cause problems later. That's what avoidance is. Next slide. So what is exposure? Facing your fears. That's what exposure is essentially. How many of you know this is an age-old technique? If you're learning horse riding, you fall off the horse. They immediately put you back up on the horse before you have that fear set in. I'm just giving you a very simple example. So exposure is essentially facing your fears. It makes sense for us to avoid situations we fear as it quickly reduces our anxiety. Again, it's helpful in the short term because it avoids you from becoming very anxious. But as we continue to avoid, it makes it harder and harder for us to face those situations in the long term. And in hoarding disorder, you have a house full of things which have taken over your life. So there are two elements of anxiety which apply to hoarding disorder. They overestimate the threat and danger of what action they have to take, and they underestimate their ability to cope, that I won't be able to cope. something will happen to me bad. Next slide. So ERP, which stands for Exposure Response Prevention, is the gold standard for hoarding disorder treatment, for anxiety disorder treatment, for many other mental health disorders. So in hoarding disorder, what is exposure and response prevention? The practice of sorting and discarding is the only way to overcome avoidance and begin to solve the clutter problem. So meeting it head on. Yes, the anxiety of your client will increase during exposure, but we have to help them work through that stress and anxiety and prevent the natural response. What's the natural response? I'm not going to do anything. Because remember, indecision is the hallmark. So their default is, it's so painful to throw things away. I can't deal with the stress. I'm not going to do anything. So that's the typical response. In here, what we will do is we'll work with them through the stress and prevent their natural response. That no, whatever it is, we still want you to discard. And here are some tools and skills for you to manage your anxiety. And one way is to work on easier locations, on easier objects than on more difficult ones, that we kind of like working on low-hanging fruits. So the person sees, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I can move to the next level. Next slide. And by the way, exposure response prevention is the gold standard for OCD, for many of the anxiety disorders, for lots of depression work. So it's used across a spectrum of disorders. So what do? We do something called graded exposure. Remember I said low-hanging fruits, then go to the more difficult ones. We teach our bodies gradually to overcome fear by becoming habituated. That means it becomes a habit to the trigger of threat. Graded exposures breaks the cycle of avoidance into manageable steps by gradually, repeatedly, over time, exposing your client who has a hoarding disorder to these situations where they have to discard without avoiding or escaping from them and staying in the situation. And we're going to talk a lot about that and practical suggestions. Next slide. So there are 4 rules for exposure for hoarding disorder. Graded. Overcoming fear is best achieved by gradually confronting the fear. And the steps must go from the least anxiety provoking to the most anxiety. It just makes like common sense. It may even start by just imagining, and we call this in vivo experimental. You can do it in your office. Just close your eyes and just imagine you're giving away these plastic bags. It could be by looking at a photograph rather than actually being in the situation. I'm just giving you some ideas. It has to be prolonged. For exposure to be effective, it must be prolonged. So it's not a one-time deal. You have to keep doing it for it to become a habit. Remember, habituation. It is repeated. Exposure tasks have to be repeated 4 to 5 times a week for maximum benefit. Because remember, what is the person actually learning? They're learning to manage their distress. And it should be done without distraction. You can't be doing 3 other things and doing graded exposure. When it is important, the person can, we need to be focused on it so that they can learn how to reduce their anxiety. So it's graded, prolonged, repeated without distractions. Next slide. And so I'm just giving you some steps for exposure. Make a list of the objects which cause you anxiety, for the person who hoards. Rank the list in order of difficulty. I can maybe get rid of newspapers more easily than medication bottles. Use this list to create your graded ladder for exposure, and use your exposure diary to record your progress. So you're going to work collaboratively with your client to create this. Next slide. And I would highly recommend you make a copy of this, just print this, which is that ladder of hierarchy. You begin with the least feared to the most feared, and on this ladder you state all the things that you're ready to discard. So we call this an anxiety ladder. Most feared to least feared. And this is very practical. You pull it up at each session. You have the client pin it up on their refrigerator so that it's clearly visible. Next slide. And then we also want to incorporate behavioral strategies, breaking tasks into small manageable parts. Remember, people who hoard also have very significant depression. And with depression, what do you feel? Low energy, lack of drive, lack of concentration. You don't have that oomph to get up and go. You have frontal lobe impairment. So breaking it into small steps is very helpful. With timelines, give instructions verbally and in writing. That's the best practice. Encourage use of timer. Why? Remember I talked about churning? Anxious people do that. What if I do this? No, here, there, no, I can't. Should I not? If you have a timer, you say 20 seconds, you have to make a decision. The timer will ring, time is up. That kind of gives them an external boundary or a guardrail that, hey, I can't go beyond 20 seconds before I have to make a decision. And let me tell you, I've used the timer very effectively. There was one gentleman I worked with who would take practically all morning to make his bed. That was part of the skills. We were teaching him to make his bed and clean his bedroom. Because he was so compulsive, we finally brought a old-fashioned, egg timer, to boil eggs. And we said, we're giving you 10 minutes. And when the timer rings, you have to leave the room however your bed is made. So it's very effective. Encourage discarding little every day, which is kind of that graded exposure. All of this aids with decision making and with problem solving, which is impaired because of depression. We talked about the frontal lobe, executive functioning. Next slide. So really, the bottom line in treatment of hoarding disorder is we want to bust avoidance. So here are again some things you can be using in therapy or your work, whatever your role is. Changing harmful avoidance patterns, often passive, into an active response. It isn't about getting rid of or ignoring painful feelings. Rather, it is about facing them in a new and more engaged way. It's not a silver bullet. If you give away all your bags, you're going to feel great. It is teaching them how to face them and manage them. Even though they're there, they're not going to overtake your life. And then choosing some other ways to cope. What is in my best interest long term? What way of behaving will most be in line with my values in this situation? If your value is that you want closer relationship with your daughter and your grandchild, and your house is so cluttered that it is dangerous for your grandchild to come, how are you living your values? What opportunities does this situation offer me? It offers you an opportunity to grow, correct? To kind of push your boundaries on what you're comfortable with. Next slide. And then you talk about lessons learned after they've done it. That you can let go of items without anything horrendous happening to you. The earth didn't open up and you were swallowed by it, or you didn't just collapse in a pile of, I don't know, a sobbing pile of, of a human being. Keeping things does not help me with my hoarding. And that very important, that's the main lesson. I can deal with distress from discarding. You know what? I didn't die. My heart beat very fast, but that did not mean I was going to have a heart attack. I can deal with distress. It is okay. I can learn to discard and live a life which is more in alignment with my values. So very important to emphasize, hey, these are the lessons we've learned together, when you've been working with me. Next slide. So what happens when your client refuses? Hey, I don't want your help. And I'm sure we all work with those clients. I did. The pictures I showed you at the beginning, those were clients who refused help. There's nothing wrong. Remember, we said you can add the specifier pour inside. Next slide. We do something called harm reduction, where the goal is just to keep people safe in their home. Focus on removing possessions away from high-risk areas, from the door, so you have egress, so you can get out in a fire, from the stove or the microwave, so you can heat your meal, from the bathroom, so you can use your bathroom. So just away from high-risk areas. Focus on creating systems to minimize acquisition and to maintain safety, not eliminate, just minimize. So that you're creating systems that will enhance their ability to live wherever they are. And then focus on managing maybe other problems and other conditions that influence a harm. So that's really the goal here, is harm reduction. Next slide. And what are the targets? Harm reduction focuses on environmental risk. We just talked about some examples: clearing egress, clearing heating cooling vent, clearing bathroom. And I'm going to share with you the uniform inspection list. Harm reduction includes functional capacity so you make an assessment of what is the functional capacity of my client, what is their intellectual functioning, what is their cognitive functioning, what is their social network, do they have other mental health, psychological and physical problems. And the assessment of the client in their home provides the best information. Next slide. Here are some questions to identify harm reduction targets. How often do you cook meals on your stove? How often do you sleep in your bed? How often do you use your shower? What makes getting around your home difficult? How often do you forget to take your medications and where you keep them? Do you open your mail regularly? Have you fallen in your home? Show me where you've fallen. How do you use the toilet when you're at home? How often do you miss paying your bills for your utilities? So these are all kind of questions for you to ask so that you can work on specific harm reduction targets. Next slide. Here are some strategies. The target would be keep the back door clean, decrease incoming paper, eliminate old and unsafe foods from the freezer, keep stovetop clean, keep important documents in a filing system. Now look at the strategy. Maintain a clean path to the back door and clean exit so that the door can open completely. Limit magazine subscriptions to 2 per year. Only buy food for the week. Discard spoiled food. Keep 24-inch clearance around the stove. Set up a filing system for important documents. And you're helping them with all of this. Set up auto payment system for your bills, especially utilities. So can you see? These are harm reduction strategies. One is target, one is the actual strategy. Next slide. So what are the goals for case management? Preservation of housing. Do you know it's in many states, hoarding is the #1 reason for evictions, especially of older adults. reduction in clutter, increase clients' capacity to manage possessions effectively moving forward, after you begin working with them, and skill building around how to manage depression, how to manage anxiety, and awareness of what are those triggers that you have. Next slide. So asking questions about hoarding. Are you reluctant, case manager, are you reluctant to have people come over? Why? Are you able to use your kitchen for preparing food? Have you been able to sleep in your bed? Or when was the last time you slept in your bed? So these are good questions, similar to the set of questions I had for harm reduction. Next slide. More questions. Why are you keeping this item? What can you tell me about this item? What might happen if this was lost or thrown away? That means discarded or you gave it away. How do you feel about your bedroom or any other space? How do you feel when you're thinking of buying or acquiring something? Next slide. And there's a way of talking about hoarding which has to be respectful and person-centered. The correct way to talk would be, you need to have a path of 36 inches throughout your home. You are not allowed to have papers on the stove because of a potential of fire. Your piles must be reduced to no more than 4 feet to prevent any avalanches of your items. Never referring to their things as junk, which is disrespectful. Next slide. Create common goals. How can I help you meet the court order because they have an eviction order? How can I help you keep housing authority off your back? Or how can we satisfy your family's concern? Especially if you want your grandson to visit you. Next slide. So you should create goals collaboratively, understanding why they save these things, help them create a living space they can use, improve decision-making skills, reduce acquiring, and reduce clutter, even for the case management. Next slide. Very important to identify their values and personal goals. What do you value most in your life? List 4 or 5 things. I want to be safe in my home. I want to be able to find things. I want to be able to eat in my kitchen. I want to be able to invite my family and my grandson over. You know what? I want a better relationship with my daughter. Next slide. So it's really balancing that with reasons to change versus reasons not to change. That's all what motivation is about. How do you balance those values the person is telling you with the reality of how their home looks? Next slide. So these are some questions. What would be the good thing about you changing your problem? What would your life be like 3 years from now if you changed your problem? Why do you think others are concerned about your problem? Like maybe your daughter or your neighbor or a case manager. Next slide. How can I help you? These questions are if your client is having a hard time changing. How can I help you get past some of the difficulty you're experiencing? If you decide to change, what would you have to do to make this happen? Next slide. This is a question if your client has little desire for change. That is, I don't need your help. Suppose you don't change. What What might be the worst that could happen to you? One day I may fall asleep with my cigarette, with my cigarette still in my mouth, and my home could go up in flames because I have so much newspaper. And by the way, that's a real story I'm giving about one of my clients. What is the best thing you could imagine that could result from changing? I think I'll feel happier most of the time, but most importantly, my daughter will allow my grandson to visit me every other weekend. Next slide. Specify objectives and timeline. Remember, people who hoard have a hard time with problem solving, decision making, attention, and categorization. Remember, I said they have a hard time categorizing things. Everything seems important to them. Delivering instructions that are broken down into small steps and tasks and which are written down is a best practice. Assign the homework and always check back. Remember, while you're working with them getting out of their depression, it is very important that you check back with them and see, are they doing their homework? Next slide. Questions to help with decision making. And I've said some of them in the earlier. How many do I already have? And is that enough? Have I used this in the past? I keep saying I'm going to use this recipe. Have I really? Do I have a specific plan to use this item? Does it seem important to me just now because I'm looking at it? Will not having this help me solve my hoarding problem? Next slide. Here are the 3 P's of decluttering, helping your client declutter. Plan. Review with the client how items will be removed from the environment. Pace. Begin with short periods of time, remembering tolerance and limit, and remember the hierarchy, the ladder of hierarchy, all of that. Partner with others, other agencies to help you with this. Next slide. When you prepare, bring 3 simple boxes in. They don't have to be anything fancy, but label them clearly. Keep, maybe, discard. Give them all the decision-making help that they need. This way, it's very clear, right? It's unambiguous. Keep, maybe, discard. Next slide. Sorting and moving stuff. The client decides. Decision. Should I keep or should I let it go? Decision. What category does this thing belong? Remember the 3 categories? Decision. Where should it go? Action. Move the item to its final destination. Next slide. Sometimes mapping a room is helpful. Dividing the room, a house into rooms. Prioritize target rooms like bathroom and kitchen and bedroom, living room, hallways and all, maybe later. Divide even that room into sections and then begin with the greatest area of risk or the highest motivation. And then create that staging area with the 3 boxes that I said, clearly visible. Next slide. Here's the decision tree. Save or discard. Save. Identify the category. Move to that interim spot. Move to final place. That means you have that box which says save. And then you need to find the spot for them eventually. Second part of the tree is discard. Identify the category, move to interim place, and then move to final place, which could be trash, recycle, give to charity, or sell. Very clearly, this is the decision tree, nothing else in between. Again, remember, They have a hard time making decisions. So all the aids you can give them for it to be unambiguous, that means they have no scope to kind of suffer the anxiety of should I not, the better. Next slide. Response to clutter and disorganization. Select one room, target an area, assess possessions, remember the hierarchy, create simple categories like keep, give away, discard, set priorities, 10-second rule, preventing churning. That is the timer or the egg, boiling egg timer, where you have a 10-second rule. Within 10 seconds, you have to have made a decision. Because people who have anxiety and depression tend to ruminate or churn. Churn is just go round and round and round and round in a circle without actually making a decision. So you create what I call an external guardrail. Hey, 10 seconds, you have to make a decision. Otherwise, guess what? To throw away 10 grocery bags may take 24 hours, which is not possible. And you should not be touching possessions. It is your client's possessions, however you think they are, not of value. Ohio is a very nice rule, which is only handle it once, which is to prevent churning. What do people with churning do? Should I not? No, this box, no, I'll take it out, put it in this box. No, I'm going to take it out from this box, put it here. The rule is you can only touch it once, and once it goes into the box, you cannot touch it again. These are all those external guardrails for people who have a hard time making decisions. The 10-second rule, Ohio. And then obviously use respectful language or mirror whatever the language is that your client is using for their possessions. Next slide. Here are some other strategies for organization. Helping them learn how to categorize. Bank statements are important. Meat cartons are not. Creating a filing system. Places, giving them a list of where they can discard or give their things away. Looking, do they have adequate storage? Develop a system of rules. Finding where these things will go eventually. So all of these are things that you're teaching them. This is skills training. How many of you are your case managers who bill for skills training? This is absolute skills training here. Next slide. Changing thoughts. Do I already own something similar? Am I buying this because I'm feeling bad right now? Will I regret this in 1 week? Can I manage without it? Next slide. Teaching them self-statements to lessen their anxiety. Feelings are not facts. You may think something bad will happen, but it's really a feeling. It's not a fact. Nervous symptoms and distressing sensations are not pleasant, but they're not dangerous. You're not going to die. Bear the discomfort in order to achieve the comfort, which could be living in alignment with your values, having your grandson visit you, having a bed where you can sleep in. Fear is a belief, and beliefs can be changed. And next slide. Setting rules for not acquiring. And this, anyone can do this. You don't have to be a therapist. So working with them to create a plan. I cannot get this or store this unless I plan to use it within the next month. I have enough money to pay for it. I have a place to put it so that it doesn't add clutter. I am sure I truly want it and will not return it. So this is getting this item is consistent with my goals and values for my life. And I have a true or a real need for it, not just a wish for it. Next slide. We talk about reasonable accommodation. Remember, I said this is one of the top reasons for eviction. Persons with hoarding disorder meet disability criteria and may request reasonable accommodation from their housing provider. This doesn't mean that you can continue to hoard. It just means that you need more time to declutter your living space to meet whatever the conditions of the lease are. But housing providers have a legal right to also request for verification about the disability. And that if the clutter is really posing a threat to everyone else, that they may not give you the reasonable accommodation. Next slide. Here are, numerous lease violations. I'm not going to go over all of them. Many of you work in clients who have had these lease violations. Next slide. So what about forced interventions? That is, those last resort. They don't really address the root cause, correct? I just told you what the root cause is. When you have that muck out, clean out, it doesn't do anything. In fact, it has a very high recidivism rate. Unless someone is really actively monitoring the situation after the clean out, it kind of reverts back, because you're not addressing hoarding disorder, you're not addressing what are the underlying anxieties and personality traits, and you're not addressing the depression and the anxiety. Next slide. So there are many kinds of what you call them, screening tools or assessment tools. The one that I'm going to show you is the clutter image rating scale. Could you just move to the next slide? And this is what the clutter image rating scale looks like. You will be getting the link to it in your package that you will get. Basically, it's a very good tool, not just good for you to kind of look at your client's home and decide, where on this 1 to 9 scale their house looks like. It's also a good tool to build insight or to gauge someone's insight. Someone's home may look like an 8, but when you show them this, they may say, oh, my home is a 3. You can clearly see there's some kind of a disconnect, right? Or a dissonance there. So you can also use this with clients, or you can tell clients who tell, hey, my home looks like an 8, and you can tell them, so what will it take to get to 3? So you can use this in many ways. So this is called the clutter image rating scale. Next slide. I'm wondering, Kelly, can you put the hoarding, the uniform hoarding checklist? It's a handout. I find this handout really, really helpful to use. It's very practical for anyone who actually works with clients, and it's in the public domain. Anyone can use it. They have given permission to use it. And basically, this is like what a Section 8 inspection would look like. And what they've created in this form is, they have actually, if you can scroll up, they go through each living area. And, so you can see kitchen, are they meeting, electrical outlets, free of electrical hazards? So all of that, which is a very, very helpful tool for all of you who are preventing an eviction, to do this and then to actually sit down with your client and show them, hey, these are the areas where you're in violation and we need to quickly resolve it or work with you long term so that it doesn't happen again. So I really like this tool. You will be getting a link for it. Please use it widely. It is free to use. It's, the people who have created it have said you don't need to ask for any permission. Also, that clutter rating scale. I have made, color. It's good to have that in color, and I have laminated my own copy so that I can use it. it will look like this. You will get the link. So they actually also go through each area, like kitchen, bedroom, living room. So there are like 4 or 5 pages. So I have printed it one time in color and then laminated it, and then I used to like carry it with me to show it to people. Did I send one more handout, Kelly? Or was it just these 2?
This was the other one. This is the quick reference.
Okay, the quick reference. Okay, got it. Now, if you can just go back to my PowerPoint, that would be great. And here I'm just giving you all of my what you call it, resources. If any of you can get your hand on the book Buried in Treasures, we actually teach that curriculum, and there are many Buried in Treasures groups. So it's a group format for people who hoard. And if you're interested in knowing more, please contact Angela to let you know where some of these groups are happening. The other book I really like is the one which says at the bottom, Effective Hoarding Intervention, a manual for non-clinical professionals. It's really for people who work in housing, with the housing authority, where you have clients living in Section 8. It's a very good book. And by the way, in that book, they actually use volunteers, trained volunteers, in helping people go through all of that exposure therapy that I was talking about, and doing the decluttering with 3 boxes, room mapping. They're actually training volunteers to do it. So think about it when you talk about building a workforce that can help your client, because 80% of you said it's a problem. Think about how can we more effectively use our volunteers. Next slide. And then I think I have more. This is the Buried in Treasures book. I would highly, highly recommend you getting the book. It also just helps you to understand it better. But if you want to even teach the class, it's like a group therapy, more like psychoeducation. Excellent book. Next slide. In terms of resources, unfortunately, they're few and far between. The Northwest Anxiety Institute, which happens to be in Portland, has a specialty in hoarding disorder. So does Pacific University, which has their psychology program, has interns who provide hoarding disorder treatment in some of their clinics. And then if you want to know more about Buried in Treasure groups, you can contact Angela, and so can you also contact Angela's counterpart in the metro area, Jill Williams. She can tell you about the Hoarding Disorders group, and she can even tell you about how to start a task force, Hoarding Disorders task force, in your particular county or region or country. Next slide. Again, I'm just giving you some more kind of resources if you're so inclined to take a look at reading these. One more slide. More resources, I think, and then maybe in my last slide has my phone number and my contact information. So we can go back to the gallery view, and I have left some time now for comments, chat. I don't know, I hope people found this helpful, or many of you had not ever attended a training. I hope this has given you a good idea about the disorder.
Thank you.
If you feel you want more information, please contact Angela, and we can see what else we can offer you.
Right. And great info. We've got lots in the Q&A box that will just add to the discussion. Let me jump in there right now. From Deborah Jones, the question is, what relationship does this have to do with people who've lived through the Great Depression era and poverty?
Really not much. What they've found is hoarding disorder happens across the world in all kinds of cultures, whether you've experienced, kind of scarcity or not. It also happens in what I call subsistence societies, like everywhere. So
And
another, you could be thrifty, if you have lived through the Depression era, but hoarding disorder is a specific disorder. Remember, I said you have to meet all those 4 criteria.
So Deborah had another question to dovetail. That if this does run in families, does that mean that it's a learned behavior?
And it could be, yes, or there could be that genetic, in terms of you're just born with these skill deficits in decision making and all of that. So I have to really read up on that too. Yeah, but possibly yes, it could be learned behavior too, because 50% of your first degree relatives, if you have someone who hoards, also have had hoarding kind of issues.
All right. So from John Woost, I believe Woost, sorry, John, if I didn't get that correct. John asks, is there a correlation of ADHD and hoarding?
That's a good question. Attention, that's a big part of executive function and cognitive function, is your ability to attend to. And I'm sure, when you have deficits in attention or attentional deficits, that it affects your ability to be really well organized. And, but I will have to really research if ADHD is a significant co-occurrence with hoarding disorder.
Okay, because we have another question around correlation from an anonymous participant. Is there a correlation between deprivation and hoarding?
Again, so you may have experienced deprivation and you may become very thrifty and you hoard, but unless you meet the clinical criteria, you're not a hoarder. You have to have, you have a very hard time, difficulty discarding, and you have cluttered living space, and it's causing extreme impairment. So yes, if you have had a history of deprivation and you're meeting those 4 criteria, yes. People who have had deprivation, yes, they tend to be more thrifty, they tend to save more, but I'm not sure everyone who's experienced deprivation also has a hoarding disorder.
Okay, great distinction. So another comment from anonymous attendee. I knew of someone addicted to methamphetamines who presented this way. Is there an explanation for this behavior?
There is no high comorbidity with substance use disorder and hoarding disorder, unless this person with meth abuse had damaged his or her brain, at which point it would not be a hoarding disorder. Remember, we rule out if you have brain dysfunction. It could be they started hoarding because they've damaged their brain so badly with meth. So unless I know more about the situation, I don't know, but that would be my assumption, because we rule out brain dysfunction when we are actually making a DSM-5 diagnosis. Like we rule out dementia, we rule out any other kind of TBI or something, so.
Okay. So Simon Foster asks, I've observed a lot more disorganization and reluctance to let go of items than I've noticed excessive acquisition. Is this the most common profile?
Correct, because with acquisition, you're actually have feelings of joy, so it's really giving it up, which causes the avoidance, the anxiety, the distress. So that is the more painful feeling to kind of manage and come to terms with. So yes, that would be more of a challenge. However, when we teach skills, we teach both how to not acquire more by asking all of those, kind of Socratic questions and, those questioning your erroneous beliefs, and then also discard. But if I were to say that which would of the two, which is more difficult, I would say discarding is more difficult, because it's more anxiety provoking, leads more to avoidance behavior.
Right. Well, moving on to a question that's going to apply to everybody. Are there any resources for individuals with low fixed income in Deschutes County, Oregon, to assist them with removing discarding items? So Anonymous, reach out to me through the OABHI email address, and I will help you with our particular area. And then for the participants here that are based in Oregon, know that you each have in your county or counties that you work within an older adult behavioral health specialist. And we can get you that list if you haven't seen it, or you can go to the website, OregonBHI.org, and there will be a listing of the Oregon older adult behavioral health specialist. So Anonymous, reach out to me. Thank you. Moving on.
I've also put Jill Williams' email on my slide deck. She's in Multnomah County, so she may also have some resources.
Perfect.
Not for Deschutes County, but for other parts of Oregon.
Right, right. Jill's a wonderful resource for hoarding. So Peter Davidson writes in, we have seen system of care boundary arguments about differentiating psychosis from hoarding in some cases. For example, there are people who keep fingernail clippings, dead vermin, feces, etc. in bags and jars, along with hoarding everything else. We find they do not express delusional beliefs per se and are remarkably unresponsive to antipsychotic medications. Yet, law enforcement, public health, relatives, and so on want these people civilly committed because, quote unquote, they are obviously mentally ill. The question is, I wonder if there is an algorithm for distinguishing psychosis-driven hoarding from hoarding of bizarre things that is not caused by psychotic illness.
Dementia does lead to hoarding bizarre things. I've seen that many times. We rule that out. That is not considered hoarding disorder. It is kind of driven by their dementia. So that's very common in dementia, hoarding all kinds of things. You know, it could be food, it could be paper napkins, it could be toilet paper, you know, which puts them at health risk because food is rotting in their pockets or under their bed. So that's one thing. Remember, to give someone a hoarding disorder, you have to rule out whether it is, you know, dementia, it's not coming due to another mental illness, and it is not due to, you know, kind of some kind of brain dysfunction, such as, you know, a massive traumatic brain injury or something. So in this case, you are saying that these are just older adults who are hoarding all kinds of strange things and are not meeting criteria for any kind of psychotic disorder. Is that what I heard?
Why don't we put Peter on, Mr. Davidson? If you're willing to join the discussion, we can unmute you. And if you want, we can also put your video feed live. I think there's a lot to unpack here. You know, there's systems of care questions, and then educating the public what is hoarding, and that you can't always commit somebody just because they have bizarre behaviors. We've got Peter, yay. Hello.
Hi there. So I took my white shirt off, so I'm just going to be on sound. Okay. These cases, because there have been several of them, arise because there's a great deal of community concern about the exterior appearance of the home and that sort of thing. And in some cases, the homes have been demolished after the person was eventually got old enough to go to assisted living. And assisted living, I have to say, has been remarkably effective for some of the worst hoarders simply because the staff intervene immediately. That nothing gains a head of four items in the community refrigerator exceeds the limit of 3, and staff intervene, and people don't tend to fight back. We've had not much helpful result from in-home personal care assistants and so on. They tend to become codependent, in my view. But the question about some of these items being hoarded are so bizarre that distinguishing ordinary hoarding, if you will, from psychosis becomes really hard to do because it isn't.
Right. So, Peter, I always say it needs to be a coordinated response. So, mental health, aging services, adult protective services, anyone else, you have to have a coordinated response. So, no one sector will have the answer. So, in the case you're describing, really trying your very best to do a thorough mental health assessment. Is this psychosis? Is this a dementia? What else is happening? Is it a depression? I just told you, 50% of people who hoard even bizarre things have a depression. So really having this coordinated response than just one agency responding is very critical. And when I was in Clackamas County, we had this coordinated response. I was the mental health, we had APS, we had aging services, we even have a consult with a psychiatrist. We all responded together to come up with a first of all, is this hoarding? Is this not hoarding? So, but I get what you're saying. I totally agree with you. It is difficult. Is this what we call squalor syndrome, which has got very poor outcomes? Is it, is it self-neglect? So all of that would have to go into the differential. So therefore, having that coordinated response becomes very important.
Can you say something more about squalor syndrome? Because I haven't heard of that, and that.
Okay, it's a common syndrome in a geriatric syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It's also called Diogenes syndrome. I can maybe Angela, if you'll want to send out a link on squalor syndrome. It's very prevalent in older adults. More often than not, they have some kind of underlying psychotic disorder, which has gone undiagnosed, undetected for years because, they lived with a family member who has died. And now for the last 10 years, they're on their own. It could be also dementia, several things. And it's really filth. Squalor is different from hoarding. So this is like they're absolutely living in filth, both in the environment and their personal, and it has a very high mortality rate, squalor syndrome.
I'd love to.
That would be part of your differential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a lot of people really upset. Is that there's in one case we had the hoarding is occurring for sure, but a dead cat with bones exposed and so on under the kitchen table. These things are not just hoarding. And so I'm very interested in learning about that, and I appreciate it.
So this is more than hoarding. This is what I'm considering very serious, that you'll need that coordinated assessment.
Thank you.
Peter, I'm curious, do you come from the world of behavioral health or psychiatry?
Yeah, I am a psychiatrist. So
you're getting the worst of the worst, which is why I can understand you be throwing these out there.
And Angela, I can send you a link on squalor, squalor syndrome, and also, what the prevalence is. And really what is very concerning is just how high the mortality is. And very often it is an issue of getting guardianship and removing the person with the help of APS. Essentially, that's the intervention in most cases.
So, Dr. Davidson, if you would care to contact me afterwards, doesn't have to be today, but I have some other potential resources for you that might help you from your specific lens.
Great.
So I'll make sure that Kelly doesn't lose your info, and we will connect offline. But for now, we need to move on to a few more questions. Thank you, Dr. Davidson. You helped us reveal another piece of the puzzle, the squalor that we see so often.
And also self-neglect should be in that differential. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Anonymous writes in the days when you could save UPC codes and redeem them for a mail-in item, it was quote unquote acceptable to save and accumulate quote unquote trash. Is it still viewed as a DO? I'm assuming that means disorder. Anonymous, feel free to weigh in with some clarifying info. But
again, to meet hoarding disorder, you have to meet the criteria. It is your entire house has been overtaken and you cannot use space for its intended purpose. And it is causing significant impairment to you and in functioning or in terms of your social roles. So it has to meet that criteria.
So moving on to Stevie Dial. Hello, Stevie. Stevie asks, how often do you see enabling by family members in hoarding cases?
Rich people have more options to get professional organizers in and, clean up the place. It'll go back to disorder. They will again send in, resources. So, if you have money, I think it goes undetected much longer because your whole family is kind of enabling you to kind of live with it, but take care of it before it gets really out of hand. Really, it's often people who are in the Medicaid space, more often than not, who come to our knowledge because social service agencies are in touch with them. And then there are those cases like, what Peter was just saying, where the community is up in arms, and so it comes to your attention. But, and rich people get identified as eccentric, which is a nice term. Oh, he's just eccentric. While, people who have less resources are really then labeled with all of these other labels. So yes, people do enable or cover up,
So again, from Anonymous, the next question is, does it have to be distressful in order for hoarding to become problematic?
Yeah, there should be some degree of impairment, yeah.
Okay. And what if people want to put things in storage or have a shed outside their home for things?
I know I've got that question many times that, hey, the hoarding is happening in the shed. I would say that is more adaptive. At least they realize, hey, I need to buy storage so that I can live in my living room. I can sleep in my bed. I would say that is pretty adaptive.
Okay. Even if you have multiple storage spaces?
If you have the money, go ahead. I would question their insight into spending so much money on things which have no value. So maybe talking to them about that. But as long as, their space is clean, they're able to sleep, they're able to eat food, they're not, kind of propagating infestation in the community.
Okay, so a question to segue that is about the folks that have the compulsion to refill that space once it is cleaned up. So they might have 5 storage units and they've cleaned out for a while, but eventually you start to see it piling back in.
And that's why that's teaching them those skills, working with them in therapy, getting to the root cause of why they all do that, why are they doing that is critical.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to come back.
Right.
It's like a relapse.
Mm-hmm. Paul, who asked about seeing the last slide again with resources. Everybody will get this PowerPoint plus any other handouts that Nirmala presents. And we're going to throw one in on the squalor as well. Paul also asks about any resources for Los Angeles, California. I'm going to let Nirmala take that one. I've got a couple of ideas, but it's not specific to California. But Nirmala,
unfortunately, I have not done I do not know the resources in LA.
I do know that former Portland State University professor Christiana Bradiotis is very active in the world of hoarding disorders. It's been a while, but I will try and track her down. And if I find that...
What is LA?
She actually moved to Canada. Do we have any Canadians in the audience? Help us out, Canadian cousins.
Who may know of some national resources is Jill.
Right.
You may want to reach out to, because Jill goes to all of these national conferences on hoarding and stuff. So she may know something in California. So I personally don't, because I really don't do a lot of teaching or training in California. So I don't know the resources for California.
So for everybody that's here, we hate to bombard Jill, but Jill Williams has become one of our content experts in this region in Oregon. And her info is on the resource slides. I'm sure she would welcome questions, or if I can get a hold of her quickly and get you some national, even international resources, happy to follow up with that. Okay.
And you know something that Peter said earlier about civil commitment?
Right.
And that situation, you know, with the person hoarding all those strange things and the dead cat, etc. You know, sometimes it's very difficult to get emergency guardianships. They're expensive, where to find them. You know, civil commitment, if you read the statute, it doesn't say mental illness, it says mental disorder. And one of the criteria is inability to take care of yourself.
Right. The self-neglect.
Correct. So under that, I would absolutely, and I was a mental health designee, and perhaps Dr. Davidson is also, I have put people under a civil commitment. Yes, it goes before a judge. Maybe the judge may not agree with me 5 days later, but absolutely based on inability to take care.
Yeah, you have to build the case for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So Crystal Harrell asks, do you have any resources for partners or spouses of individuals who struggle with this hoarding disorder?
You know, there used to be a 12-step, believe it or not, group, like a 12-step group, both for people who hoard and a support group. I don't know after the pandemic, you know, what the state of that group is. So I can't really.
When I reach out to Jill, I'll ask her for that.
Correct. So and you know, so many of you said, 80% said we have this problem in our community and all that, you know, really trying to figure out, you know, what are the gaps in your community? Do you need to create a support group for you know, family members, or do you need to create task force where you have this kind of coordinated response? You know, I was shocked that 80% of the audience who answered said they have a hoarding disorder problem in their county or region.
So for those of you that are based in the US, we can give you the resource to go to your local city compliance officer or county compliance officer who might have some of this at their fingertips already, because they're needing to bring in resources to help these folks get right with the law. It's gotten that bad. Most of those folks only deal with clutter hoarding that's external, outside of the house, but they might have a few aces up their sleeves. So reach out to your city or county compliance officer. Can't speak for those guys, getting tongue-tied. Can't speak for you all outside of the States, but I'm sure you have something similar. So Simone Weiss asks, one of the things I'm interested in when there are comorbidities with cognitive-based disorders or struggles, dementia or TBI, how does that change the way you approach the hoarding behaviors when decision-making and executive functioning are so challenging in both areas?
So with dementia, we don't call it hoarding. It's not hoarding. You know, remember, we just talked about what are the root causes of hoarding. You know, it comes about because of brain dysfunction. And so, you know, there are no effective treatment for it, just like there are no effective treatments for neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia, you know, like wandering, agitation, you know, aggression, impulse control, which are all driven by brain dysfunction. You know, yes, we are talking about behavioral interventions, all of that. So there is no treatment. And plus for talk therapy, you have to have sufficient memory to actually participate in therapy. So it would not be a viable option for someone with dementia to actually, so it would really be behavioral. Staff are checking their pockets, staff are checking their rooms, family members are checking under the mattress. So there's really no treatment.
Good answer. We've got tons more questions. We are running out of time. I want I want to address, a couple of you have put in a question about finding a local task force or starting one. Sophia Brown writes, I'm a hoarder in recovery and done several clinical trials, and I hope to start a task force here in New York. Can an ordinary citizen start a task force? I think so. I think you would have to partner with agencies and entities. It would be hard to do it just as a
Correct.
citizen group, but
Right. And you know, a lot of the work that we do through our initiative, of which Angela is a part, is really identify the needs and then build a coalition, build a
right.
task that comes together. So if you think, I mean, this is Oregon specific, reach out to your older adult specialist and say, hey, I'd like to look at exploring building a task force for hoarding disorder. You know, we have task force for dementia, we have task force for all kinds of things.
And in other states, check out the web page for your Department of Human Services, whatever you call it in your state, because there should be something going on around aging and older adults. More and more states are starting to do the work, see what's already happening, especially at a state level. And then you can find those content experts that might actually be interfacing with your area. So reach out to your local governments, ask them what they're doing around older adults and behavioral health.